Stephen, what was the most interesting aspect of your time at the ABC?
It's such a hard question to answer, Yvonne, because there are so many interesting things about being at the ABC. But I guess the truthful answer is to work with content makers who are passionate about public broadcasting and who want to take to the people stories and tales and information, and to work with them to make sure that they can get that information out the best way they can that causes as little problem as possible for the ABC.
What do you think the impact will be of the new uniform defamation laws?
I think that all the people who think that the uniform defamation laws are a great, big, wonderful thing for the media are kidding themselves. And I don't think that the media is in any better position. In fact, I think in a lot of ways it's in a worse position than it was before, and I know I'm in the minority about that. But
why is that?
And I know this is heretical for everybody who practices in defamation, but I think the passing of 7A trials is a great disaster for media defendants. It's certainly a disaster for the ABC. We have had spectacular success with lowering the load, reducing the costs, and making matters manageable through the 7A process. Where it breaks down for people is where lawyers, external lawyers or barristers take control of the 7A process and turn it into a whole new procedure that creates costs and energy and doesn't just deal with the actual matters itself. I know the judges don't like it. I know I was there when a jury member leant forward and said, "Yes, but is it true?" But those things don't take away from the basic situation that we live in a world now where plaintiff lawyers and plaintiff barristers plead every conceivable ridiculous imputation they can. And if you don't have a 7A process, you have to deal with them. You have to defend them. And for a media lawyer, in a broadcaster or a publisher, that means a lot of work and a lot of expense. Often, you really believe fundamentally that no juror is ever going to believe that that imputation will arise, but a judge will think it can arise, and so it'll withstand the capacity to inform arguments, but it won't withstand the jury test. And I tried to do some quick calculations before I came. Something like 93% of imputations pleaded against the ABC were dealt with on 7A trials during my time. That's a huge amount. And it means that what we've had to deal with and take to trial has been minimised. A good outcome at a 7A trial means you get good settlement chances. And it's the main reason why we've only had 2 cases go to trial in the 5.5 years that I've been there, because we've been able to achieve a lot of success through the 7A process, and I lament it. But I think the true problem with the Uniform Defamation Law, and this is epitomised in judgments such as Obeid, is that we're stuck with the reasonableness test and what that means. And unfortunately, judges do not take the reasonableness test to be about whether or not the media lawyer or media defendant has been reasonable, but whether they have been perfect. And the standard is perfection, not reasonableness. And so, while we have cases like that stay on the books and management don't want to appeal to go up above, we're never going to get a situation where we can have a kind of High Court view about whether we should follow the Reynolds path or the Jamil path, or most recently the responsible journalism path that the English courts have taken, all of which leads to a much more sensible solution and really takes your victim as you find them. You shouldn't judge Four Corners the same way you judge the morning's program on radio. You just shouldn't. The standard should be completely different because of the kind of program it is and the kind of way it goes about and the kind of audience they have.
What was your most difficult case?
It's the Jane Doe case in Victoria about privacy. And the reason it's kept me awake is because sooner or later in this country we're going to have a law of privacy, and anybody who thinks otherwise is just kidding themselves. The question's going to be whether that's foisted upon us by a statute. The ALRC reforms are there, but I personally don't think a government's going to take them up. I think it's much more likely it'll be made by judges. And so what do? Do we let a county court judge or a district court judge in Queensland, county court judge in Victoria, make a decision which affects the way we do our daily activities? Or do we fight that and go on above and find out what the High Court has to say? I think the High Court was pretty clear in Lena Gay Meats about what it what it thought about this. And I don't think they thought a tort of privacy was the way we'd go. I think they thought, and this is most clear in the Gummo judgment, that it would go down the equitable line. The Jane Doe decision that Felicity Hampel came down with is a disaster, really, because without actually dealing with any of the complex legal arguments which were put before her, she found against the ABC on every count. And so we now have, for the first time in the common speaking world, a judge saying that there's a duty of care between a broadcaster and the subject of a broadcast. And we just can't allow that to stand. And I know there are a lot of my colleagues in the media who think we should just abandon the appeal and let Jane Doe stay where it is and treat it as an aberration. But I think that's a misthinking, and probably brought out of the fact that they don't really know enough about the detail of the case. But Jane Doe is a case where the information came to the journalist in open court. We will never have a better fact situation about gathering the information.
What was your most rewarding case?
I have to say the most rewarding case was the O'Neill decision, which started off being just an extraordinary nightmare for the ABC. An injunction was being brought against us.
This was the fisherman's story?
Yeah, that's right, in relation to a program we were going to broadcast, which was a documentary dealing with the life of a man who was in jail for murder of a child, and he's sentenced to life imprisonment in Tasmania. And the documentary was examining hypotheses about what other crimes he might have been involved in before he was convicted for life for murder. The three judges who'd gone against us seemed to me to be so wrong that it was important to press that forward.
Why?
Because I think that the notion that judges can, for personal or capricious reasons, stop something going to air which is clearly in the public interest, I think that's wrong. And I think we should have a society where free speech is valuable and worthwhile. And I'm pleased that the judgments in the High Court really emphasise that.
Free speech, do we have more of it now or less, do you think?
I do think that the courts have moved significantly against media defendants in the last 5 years. I do feel that very, very strongly. Decisions like Favell, for instance, are decisions which come right down to the black letter law view of the tort of defamation. And I think it's time for that to be fundamentally rethought, because it's not and shouldn't be a game about how the plaintiff thinks they can say, well, I can make a claim here out of this program by pleading these imputations which they can't defend. The tort should be about what the program really did, and what the program makers intended, and what the ordinary reasonable person took out of it. I don't think the jury system allows for the ordinary reasonable person, because they're not asked what their opinion is. They're asked what they think the ordinary reasonable person thinks, and I think that creates a chilling effect which is just getting worse as the country becomes more conservative. So... Is that why you're leaving the country?
Where to now for Stephen Collins?
I'm very sad to leave the ABC. I love the ABC, but I had my children very young. Well, I mean, I personally didn't have them, but they came into my life very young, and so my life has been defined by my children growing up, and I never did the living overseas thing, and I don't, for whatever reason, I've always been drawn to London as a place that I wanted to live and to work. And curiously, when I told my son that I was going to do that, like, he went, can I come too? So it's going to be an adventure for Dad and son, and that'll be good. So I'm looking forward to that. My daughter is a cadet at the Age in Melbourne, so she'll be here to keep things honest in publication in Australia. But who knows, I might come back one day.
Well, the Gazette hopes you do and wishes you will.
Thank you.
Thank you.